every single time he's been called out for saying something ridiculous. Like here he is back in 2019, where he also said that he was being serious when he was siding with Russia here.
On the front lines. You think it's a joke?
Why do I care? Why do I care what's going on in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia? And I'm serious. Like, why do I care?
I'll tell you why.
And why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am?
Because those of us who are watching...
Ooh, almost treasonous. Siding with Putin. Who's siding with Putin? I haven't seen anybody do that. I've seen a few people try to side with the United States. And that, says Mitt Romney, a man who got...
And by the way, this is from almost a year ago. Since this this latest clip, Tucker has definitely sided with Russia a number of times in a number of segments. So, but this is the defense he always tries to go back to is, oh, when I was saying I was siding with Putin, I was just joking. Wasn't being serious. Can you imagine if Don Lemon at CNN was like, why don't we invade Canada? Or Anderson Cooper, you know what? I side with Putin. Why shouldn't I? I side with Russia. Like, think of the the reaction that would have gotten. But because it's Tucker, there's sort of this built-in assumption for us reasonable people that he's just a clown and shouldn't be taken seriously anyways, which is true, which is exactly what his own lawyers argued. This is how he got out of a lawsuit. Fox News won a court case by persuasively arguing that no reasonable viewer takes Tucker Carlson seriously. Which, in a weird way, I agree with their lawyers. No reasonable person takes Tucker seriously. The problem is, there are many people who are not reasonable that watch Tucker's show that believe every word he says. So how he uses his platform matters. That includes even ridiculous discussions around potentially invading Canada, which of course is not going to happen. But this is how you begin to acclimate people to insane ideas. You test the water, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then continue down that line in where you get a reaction. And we've seen that with Tucker's position when it comes to more recently with Putin and Russia. Now, also worth mentioning here that this isn't the first time Carlson, who has been praised in the past over his supposed non-interventionist anti-war stance, which I didn't even mention that till now. And Tucker pretends to be anti-war, and here he is calling to invade Canada. He's advocated for military action against the U.S.'s neighbors. Of course, much of Carlson's so-called anti-war rhetoric comes in the service of authoritarian leaders such as Putin or Syria's Bashar al-Assad. In 2019, for instance, the ultra-nationalist host seemingly advocated for military intervention in Mexico, calling the country a hostile foreign power while saying the U.S. must strike back. So this isn't the first time that Tucker has called for military intervention while in other segments pretending he's anti-war. Very anti-war, Tucker Carlson. Now, let me get to really the thing that bothered me the most about this clip. It's just this continued idea that the so-called trucker convoy or freedom convoy that took place a year ago in Canada, that was really truckers, when the vast majority of them were not. And all the groups and all the 90%, I'm going to get to more quotes here, but 90% of truckers in Canada at the time, a year ago, vaccinated. Right in line with the rest of the country. Yet there is this idea that, oh, I stand with the truckers in their protest against this authoritarian Trudeau government, which, by the way, there are arguments to be made about other positions Trudeau has in terms of cozying up to the oil industry. But apart from like actual criticisms there was no authoritarian garbage around COVID and vaccines. No one was holding you down to giving you a vaccine. All of this entire narrative around how this was a convoy with the working class, these working class truck, all complete bullshit. That is a line that continues to be perpetuated even in this article that I shared with you here from Daily Beast. Daily Beast, not a conservative website here. Even they mention about how the Freedom Convoy made up of anti-vax truckers, which that's not what it was made up of. So more information here. Teamsters Canada, this is one of the unions here, is proud to represent over 55,000 professional drivers from diverse industries across the country, approximately 15,000 of which are long-haul truck drivers, 90% of whom are vaccinated. The so-called Freedom Convoy and the despicable display of hate led by the political right and shamefully encouraged by elected conservative politicians does not reflect the value of Teamsters Canada nor the vast majority of our members, and in fact has served to delegitimize the real concerns of most truck drivers today. So look, I've done several videos. At the time, I did several videos on this and going into the real concerns that truckers had that had nothing at all to do with the vaccine. But here's another group. This is the Canadian Trucking Alliance. They put out several articles on this at the time. In this one, they write, they do not support and strongly disapprove of any protests on public roadways, highways, and bridges. CTA believes such actions, especially those that interfere with public safety, are not how disagreements with government policy should be expressed. Members of the trucking industry who want to publicly express displeasure over government policies can choose to hold an organized, lawful event on Parliament Hill or contact their local MP. What is not acceptable is disrupting the motoring public on highways and commerce at the border. And in a second statement, they wrote this: while a number of Canadians are in Ottawa to voice their displeasure over this mandate, it also appears that a great number of these protesters have no connection to the trucking industry and have a separate agenda beyond a disagreement over cross-border vaccine requirements. As these protests unfold over the weekend, we ask the Canadian public to be aware that many of the people you see and hear in media reports do not have a connection to the trucking industry. Last piece on this. Anti-vax convoy organizers, the organizers, previously targeted picketing oil refinery workers in Alberta, targeting union workers, protesting the workers. This is the group that was supposedly standing up for the working class truckers. So look, I link to all my sources always below the video. You can read through all these pieces yourself, get all the information, but I'll just grab a couple paragraphs here. Despite presenting the so-called Freedom Convoy as a protest centered on the concerns of blue-collar workers, the president of the convoy apparently doesn't believe in unity if you're in a union. James Botter created Canada Unity, the group behind the Freedom Convoy that has shut down Canada's national capital. Botter also authored the group's rambling Memorandum of Understanding, which calls for deposing Canada's elected government. And yes, that's what the leaders of the group are trying to do. They wanted to replace Justin Trudeau. A handful of nobodies thinking that they could somehow come in and just replace an elected leader. Ridiculous. 2 years ago, Botter was part of a similar far-right convoy that mobbed a picket line and threatened to run over locked-out oil refinery workers. So there's a lot more on this, and that's just one of the leaders of the convoy. There are others that also have similar connections to the far right. I did a piece on, in fact, Tucker and his coverage of this. Tucker uses convoy to cosplay as working class ally, so I break a lot of it down in that video. Again, I'll link to that video as well below this video in the description box on YouTube. But yeah, you know, the Canada stuff, there's no threat of the U.S. invading Canada, so I have a hard time getting worked up about, you know, that discussion or that all that crap. But this ongoing idea that there was this authoritarian movement again, or this authoritarian shutdown on these working class blue collar truckers, just complete trash.